Okay, welcome to our second CHIC Digital webinar brought to you by Big Picture Conferences, operating in the time of COVID-19, hotel and resort operations best practices. I'd like to start off with just a little bit of housekeeping for today's webinar. Our webinar will be an hour in length, and we will do a Q&A session on the very tail end of the webinar, which will last about 10 to 15 minutes. So submit your questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to those questions at the end of the webinar. So if there's something pertinent that you're waiting to hear on, we will be answering those at the end. I'd like to turn it over to your co-moderators for today. We have Sylvia Occhiuzzi and Nicole Nguyen, both of CBRE. Ladies, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good afternoon to everyone who's joined our webinar today. Nicole and I are really eager to jump into this conversation and hear from two seasoned hotel operators on how their companies are navigating these unprecedented times. Many of us have seen downturns before, but there truly is no playbook for how to manage a hotel through an economic and health crisis that has brought demand for hotel rooms to a screeching halt and scared countries around the world into lockdown. Combine anemic occupancy levels with a global health pandemic, and you have the makings of an operating environment this industry has never seen before, at least not to this magnitude. That's the brutally negative side. The positive side is that we are starting to see the tops of green shoots, or at the very least believe that most markets have reached the bottom. And now we're looking to places around the world that are navigating through the next phase of the pandemic, reopening economies without a cure for COVID-19. Based on the data CBRE is tracking, occupancies in parts of China went from low single digits to around 30% last week. And in the US, Marriott indicated that some drive-to markets where restrictions have either been eased or lifted saw weekend occupancy reach 50%. The reintegration buzz is real, and it can be seen in global gateway cities such as Barcelona, leisure destinations such as Venice, and even Vancouver, where crowded beaches and parks are signs of local pent-up demand and are showing us what we may expect as provinces around the country begin to reopen. The images don't necessarily look like what we remember life like a mere 2.5 months ago, but there is a level of familiarity there, and I think it's providing us with some optimism that we will reemerge from the lockdowns and form a new normal, or the next normal, as I heard it recently referred to. It will take time, that's for sure. How long is still an exercise many experts are trying hard to determine, but in the meantime, societies are preparing to reopen.
There's no doubt that the reemergence of hotel demand will be heavily tied to consumer confidence and safety as people look to return to their previous activities, whether that is making their regular commute from home to the office or traveling. Any travel, whether leisure or business, is a major part of almost everyone's lives. While we all understand that demand levels will likely be low, hotels and resorts that provide guests with the reassurance that they are choosing a property where the operator is taking every reasonable precaution as it relates to cleaning will help to build this consumer confidence and hopefully generate momentum over time. A recent sentiment survey conducted by the Conference Board of Canada indicated that nearly 70% of Canadians who plan to take a trip this year will stay within Canada. Approximately 80% of those said that they would be traveling by car or RV. There is absolutely no doubt that Canadians are looking forward to a time when they are able to travel again, but they appear that they will be cautious in their approach and stay relatively local. The hotel industry is not new to cleanliness, cleaning, or sanitation. It is a hallmark of the industry, and it is part of every guest experience during each stay. This is the topic we're digging into this afternoon, and here with us is Guido Kerpel, the COO of Newcastle Hotels and Resorts, and Aodhan Sheahan, Senior Vice President of Operations for MasterBuilt Hotels. These two gentlemen will provide their perspectives on how cleaning and sanitation at their properties has been enhanced, the procedures put in place to facilitate a smooth operation, and the tools they are using to instill the confidence in their guests as they operate in time of COVID-19. We'll turn the floor over to Guido and Aodhan in a moment to provide a bit of background on the companies that they are here representing. To get us started, perhaps each of you could give us a bit of background on how many hotels you're operating, the geography of your portfolio, and the type and branding of these properties. Guido, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Sylvia and Nicole for the invitation, as well as the CBRE team. I'm honored to be on your panel, and it's great fun. So thank you very much. So I work for Newcastle Hotels. It's a family-owned management and ownership company located in Shelton, Connecticut. Our owner, David Buffum, has recently retired, and the second generation of Buffums have taken over about 2 years ago. So they've injected a fair bit of energy and vision, and our goal is to expand our North American platform. I started as general manager at the Westin Nova Scotian in Halifax about 20 years ago, and I'm currently the chief operating officer for the company. So in that capacity, I do day-to-day operations with our RVPs. I work with Jeremy and Julian Buffum closely, and work with the other operational disciplines to really make sure that we maximize efficiency and create value for our ownership groups. So we are a fairly small company, I would say. We have about 15 operating hotels. We have 4 under construction. We operate in the full service space as well as the premium select asset space. And we have brands that range from Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, and HGI, and we're preferred operator for all those 4 platforms. Geographically, we're in Eastern Canada, as well as Central Canada, and then along the Eastern Seaboard in the United States, and we go as far west as Kentucky and New Orleans. And our deals basically fall in 3 buckets. We have wholly owned assets that the company, thus the family own, and we do JVs with local developers. And then lastly, it's also about 1/3 of our business is third-party management. And in this day and age of those mega third-party management companies, owners really like our relative small size, so that we can really keep an eye on the assets, and we provide their services at more or less the same cost as those mega companies. So that's in a nutshell who we are and what we do. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Guido. As Nicole mentioned, I'm with MasterBuilt Hotels. We're headquartered here in Calgary, Alberta. I've been with MasterBuilt about 4.5 years, and we're a ground-up developer of hotels, mostly in the limited and select service space. We own and/or have an ownership interest in almost all of our operating hotels, and we're currently operating 19 hotels across Canada, essentially. Right now, as far east as Quebec, but looking at new developments east of Quebec in the Maritimes, and as far west as British Columbia, Vancouver Island, and Kitimat in the north. And all of our hotels right now operate under 2 brands. We are sort of a master developer for the Microtel by Wyndham brand. So that forms the lion's share of our operating portfolio at the moment. But we also have some Marriott Select Service brands that we have both ownership interests in, and that we operate. And I've had the good fortune, I guess, over the years, over the last 20 or so years, to be involved in companies that own and operate hotels of every brand, stripe, size, right from St. John's, Newfoundland, beautiful St. John's, Newfoundland, all the way to Vancouver Island in Western Canada. So all of our assets are in Canada now, and all of my history and background is in Canadian hotel operations as well.
Amazing.
Thanks. How many of your hotels, Aodhan, are open and operating right now? And are there any factors you're considering as you look to maybe move closed properties into the open category?
Yeah, so we currently have just 2 hotels that are closed. We're closed in our Mont Tremblant, Quebec hotel, which was probably the easiest decision in terms of the closure. You know, we're kind of on the road up to the resort in that location, and resort operations there closed in a fairly sudden and sort of total way, which made that clear. We're also closed in Kitimat in northern BC. And while the triggers and the considerations are a little different for opening different hotels, we intend to open both those hotels in June. And we're just paying attention to things depending on whether it's a leisure or a corporate market, to things like opening of schools and daycares in terms of people's flexibility and movement. Obviously government orders and regulations around the movement of people, provincial borders, those kinds of things I think will be important for leisure movement, but also talking to our corporate customers on a really frequent basis and finding out what their plans are, especially in some of the major industrial operations. The pause can only be so long before there are more and more things that just absolutely have to be done. So staying in close touch with our customers and also monitoring things like flight schedules and announcements by Canadian Airlines in terms of accessing some of the places where we operate in more tertiary markets, where flight access is very important.
And Guido, maybe the same question for you.
Yeah, sure. So it's actually quite interesting. When this all really came down to pike and middle to end of March, and when we started to have an enormous amount of Zoom calls internally, and heard of mass closings of hotels in North America, we obviously started to do our analyses. And in many cases, we found that just with a few occupancy percentage points, we could actually provide the same or better financial picture than closing down. Because if you close down, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. You still need to have people in the building. You need the okay from the brand. There's costs associated with that. And then when you reopen, there's costs associated with reopening from a brand perspective. And then in various municipalities, you need authorization by the city or town to reopen. And if you have the misfortune of dealing with, particularly picky fire marshal, all the items that could have been grandfathered as part of the previous walkthroughs could be waived, and you might be on the hook for additional costs there. So we felt that it was better in most cases to stay open as opposed to close. Having said that, we have the same number as Aodhan. We have 2 hotels that are closed down, and those are in real destination areas where the economy really is basically a one-trick pony. So that's in Jekyll Island and in New Orleans. And both those areas are basically closed down at this point. So that's how we analyzed it. That's how we went through the process, and I think if and when those locations show signs of life again, we'll be ready to open up.
Mm-hmm. So
Thanks, Guido.
Sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
No, I was going to say that's really interesting. I hadn't given consideration to certainly the fire life safety issues on reopening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sort of along that similar vein then, so when some of those travel restrictions started to come down and public health directives were first announced, what were some of the immediate adjustments that you made from a cleaning and sanitization perspective? Guido, maybe you can sort of tag on from your.
So, I mean, it's pretty convoluted, really. I mean, initially, we really kept our eye on what the CDC was recommending, and we held on to those recommendations. Ecolabs was pretty fast in providing information, so we really used those two platforms to synergize and to make sure that we had the information for our operating hotels. So as time moved on, we obviously needed to get a little bit more sophisticated and dig deeper in how we operate to make sure that both our employees as well as our guests are safe. So, you know, things that went by the wayside almost right away were the gyms, the pools. We started doing either takeout from a food and beverage perspective, room service, or grab and go bags. That's what we did. We took out all collateral out of the guest rooms, with the exception of basically the remote control, which now is a nice little plastic bag. Things like that we did in order to make sure that our guests are safe. And then in addition to that, you know, obviously a ton of signage everywhere. Some of it initially was perhaps not the most professional, was a piece of tape on the floor. We've since modified that to be a little bit more branded. For instance, in Jekyll Island, where, you know, there's lots of turtles, we have little turtles on the floor, so that when we open up, it looks a little bit more professional than originally done. I wish I had invested in a company that does plexiglass, because I think they are making an absolute killing. So we've I don't know how many sheets of plexiglass we've purchased as a company, but it must be a ton. So in between workstations, in the kitchen, at the front desk, we're even contemplating using some of those sheets in between pieces of workout equipment, if we can't create that distance between you know, a treadmill and an elliptical. So those are kind of the things, but I can go on for probably an hour with what we've done. It's a very extensive list. I don't want to take away time from Aodhan.
Yeah, no, thanks, Guido. Aodhan, yeah, similar question.
Yeah, as Guido said, obviously it's you know, everybody here is involved in hotels and hotel operations one way or another, and knows, you know, how many little line items and tasks there are. But yeah, for us, the response kind of started, you know, it became clear in the early part of March that this was going to be something pretty significant. So and it also, I think, became clear pretty early on that it was going to sort of simultaneously be you know, require enormous focus, you know, effort and learning really on that health front, which takes us down the cleaning and sanitization road, but also on the communication front, you know, that it was clear right away that there was questions, concerns, even fears, and that those were really, you know, equally present, both in, you know, associates and our employee teams and in guests. So yeah, we issued our first sort of pretty comprehensive written guide for COVID-19 operations in our hotels, probably in the end of the second week of March. And by the third week of March, then kind of had put all of our employees back and forth across the country through a short video training module that they could sign off on, and that they had participated in. And then in our hotels, it became kind of a progressive thing. There was layers. It was sometimes every day something would change, and sometimes it was sort of you know, several days or a week in between. But similar to the things that Guido mentioned, you know, we went from the disappearance of buffets and that style of food service into grab and go. Pools, you know, closed at a certain stage. We made efforts to hang on to fitness centers as long as we thought it was, you know, reasonable to do that and safe to do that, kind of monitoring the various public health agencies and guidelines. But it was a key focus for us actually at that time, and something that we'll be thinking about as we come out the other end a little bit as well, was you know, if we can operate some of these services in a safe manner, will we take a little bit of risk on the health front in order to contribute in a positive way to the wellness side for our guests, especially if you have guests who are, you know, staying with you or living with you on a long or medium term basis. And so kind of try to find that balancing act. And then since then it's been key for us to try to maintain a bit of that balance, always leaning towards safety, but also just looking for every opportunity to remember that we're hotels still, we're in the hospitality business, and we still want to give our guests a sense of hospitality and an experience of hospitality while we look after all of these, very technical and important things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's such
if
an important
I can
point.
jump in for a second, if
For
that's
sure.
okay.
Yeah, for sure.
You're absolutely 100% correct, and it's not just what you do; it's how you do it. And I think what we've all learned as an industry is that communication is just absolutely paramount. Not just to your guest, how you communicate, but internally to your stakeholders as well, whether that is your owners, the brand, or your employees. So on our end, what we've done is numerous conference calls, Zoom calls with our employees and management teams to make sure that they understand where we're coming from as an industry and a company. So I agree with Aodhan. It's like it's communication in addition to all those little light items that we've changed.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how important the visibility and that openness is becoming.
That's right.
How important all of that is. Even just the timing with which you're doing the cleaning. Guido, you'd mentioned that when we were chatting about sort of how you've just shifted that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, things that we have some extended stay groups with us. They're sort of pre-quarantining themselves in our assets in Canada, and it's just absolutely paramount how you deal with those groups and how you're able to pivot and modify your service model to make sure that these folks are looked after. And to Aodhan's point, I mean, we're still in the hospitality industry. That might be a fault, or that might be our saving grace. I'm not 100% sure. We want that interaction with our guests. At this point, it's not possible. But as we navigate through all of this, we're certainly learning a heck of a lot. And with these large groups that we have, it is just paramount that we keep them as well as our employees safe. From a business model, since they really require almost no service, it's actually fairly profitable business, to be honest.
So interesting.
Yeah. Over the last several weeks, we've seen pretty much every major hotel brand, some of the airlines, et cetera, roll out these enhanced, cleaning and sanitization guidelines. And they've done a good job, I think, of communicating these. Certainly all their membership are getting emails, and they've been very public about what they're rolling out. But Guido, you mentioned that you have hotels under kind of all the four, biggest brands. They're Can you boil it down for me? Can you help me understand, I guess, what are the commonalities amongst all these programs? What's new? What's just an enhancement of something we were already doing in the cleaning and sanitization process? But what are the common themes here? What are we talking about with these programs?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually to see the brands actually working together and creating some platforms to create some cohesiveness and to provide the general public some sense of comfort that as an industry we're on this. So I think that's very good to be specific on a hotel level, what we're doing. When a guest checks out, we let the room sit idle for 2 days. So whatever virus is there, hypothetically, would be dead. So after 2 days, we go in the room and then we clean it. So that's one of the things that we do. Where cleaning in the past was sort of a back of the house, you do it at night, it cannot be seen by your customers. It's now a front of the house kind of thing. So it becomes the theatrics of cleaning that we're doing. So our night cleaner or the night cleaner duties are actually being done during the day now. So our clients, our customers are actually seeing us clean, doorknobs, floors, elevator buttons and things like that. So those are the things that we're changing on a day-to-day basis to just give our customers, a feeling of confidence that we know what we're doing. We want to keep it clean.
Yeah, I think what the brands are doing is part of what I think we've both said already, that they're engaging in that communication. They're obviously doing it on kind of a mass front. but they're engaging in communication with their customers all over the country and all over the world to try and begin building that confidence. Guido mentioned that cleaning and sanitization, is coming out of the back of the house, and I think that's really true. That it's been historically, while essentially just as important as it is now, always in hotels. But it was sort of table stakes. It was the baseline expectation prior to the guest evaluating your hotel. Now it's very much a front of house product. It's a part of what the customer is buying now, is going to be not only the actual cleaning, but the visibility, the transparency around it, to build that confidence, going forward. And the same applies, I think, to associates. It's just going to be very much front and center, and stay that way for a while, and it'll become part of the branding of our hotels. And for the major brand families, I think it'll become part of the branding, at least for the medium term.
Yeah, and I think as an industry, we might actually have a bit of a leg up on the Airbnbs of the world. I mean, we really can show the consumer that, as an industry, we know what we're doing. And if you're going to someone's house, an Airbnb product, you just don't know what you're going to get. So I think as the public starts to travel again, initially leisure, I think this might actually help us out as an industry, capturing back some of that market segment.
Yeah.
I think that's, and I know that's not what we're here really today to talk about, but I think that can be huge. We've been very focused on hotels' ability to provide sort of safety, security. We've been big on the sort of the regulations that hotels have to follow, and not to appear overly opportunistic about this, but I think that this cleanliness and sanitation piece does open up an opportunity for us to say that those regulations that apply to us are gonna result in a cleaner environment and a better experience for guests. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I would agree. One quick side note, if you don't mind. I was on a Marriott call, I think it was last week, and the presenter was talking about a discussion that Don Clary, the president of Marriott, had with some of the governmental agencies that he was dealing with, and he presented them the cleaning policies or sanitation policies that they have rolled out, and these government agencies were just absolutely flabbergasted how far ahead Marriott was rolling this out. So that I think that really just shows the maturity of the brand and the industry.
Yeah. And so, Guido, to that point, do you think that governments will step in at some point and put some formal requirements in place in addition to what the brands have already done?
I don't know. I mean, it seems to me to have bigger fish to fry, working on the curve, and dealing with healthcare not being, overwhelmed. I mean, perhaps at some point they'll come up with more stringent sanitation requirements. I haven't seen anything from the municipalities coming out as of yet, but more than likely there will be something. Yeah, but I think as an industry, we will be ahead of that, because we need to get that confidence back from our customers. So it behooves ourselves as an industry to be way ahead of government on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important for our customers, but I think it's also important long-term for us as an industry. I think that increased regulation just generally is going to be, one of the outcomes of the COVID-19 crisis. And I think if we can regularly communicate with government, use our provincial and national hotel and hospitality bodies to do that, to communicate where we are, the standards we have in place, the processes we're following, that may result in less regulation for us as well. We haven't seen it much so far. I think governments have been engaged in kind of putting out fires, and the hotel sector hasn't been problematic, from a health or a virus perspective so far. But I do think we will see some more of that. We're going to see our banquet spaces, our food and beverage spaces, rather than just covered by some of the blanket regulations around social gathering, probably get some specific regulations coming in. So I think good sort of industry relations and government relations will be really important.
Yeah,
For sure. Oh, great.
I'll open this up to either one of you, but in cases where you have a hotel that's not branded, either operated as an independent or whatnot, how are you dealing, I guess, with building a framework around your cleaning protocols there? Are you taking kind of the branding best practices and creating kind of your own house standard?
Yeah, and I think Guido probably has some pieces there. All of our hotels are branded, but I think to sort of broaden the question a little bit, we are doing that. We're monitoring, all of the brands, publications, and the standards that they're coming out with, as well as kind of, multiple provinces and public health agencies. And then we are putting together our own guidelines and our own communications and manuals for our staff. And that's, for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we want to have sort of our own management platform that has the best of the best kind of assembled. But also from our associates' perspective, we want them to, clearly see that we are putting these things together, that it's really important to us, and it's coming out with our names and signatures attached to it, because I think it builds confidence in them. But yeah, I'll pass to Guido because I know he has some independent operations.
Yeah. So I'm actually really proud of what our RVPs have put together over the last couple of weeks. They've worked on 2 or 3 playbooks. One is a closing down playbook. What areas to focus on in case you need to close down a facility, and they went into some pretty in-depth research. But on the more positive side, what do you do when you find yourself in one of these pandemics on a day-to-day hotel ops perspective? And we have a playbook for that as well. I think it's like 20 pages long or something like that. And it does what Aodhan just said. It takes a little bit from the brands. It takes a little bit of common sense. It infuses a lot of what we already know from a property specific perspective. And it really just puts a nice package together that when anyone walks into an asset, you just give them the book and they can make sure that both customers as well as employees are safe.
Yeah. All right. So I think a lot of the discussion so far has been focused around guest rooms, but Nicole, did you want to maybe address some questions around some of the public areas?
Yeah, I think that's, top of mind for a lot of people is, the guest rooms, it makes sense pulling out the collateral, some of the more intense processes, leaving the room to hang for a day or two after somebody's checked out. But I guess, what does this mean for our high contact, maybe public areas or amenity spaces? You guys have touched a little bit on pools and fitness centers, spas at certain, full service assets, certainly. And then on the F&B side, did this kill the breakfast buffet? Or will we see those come back, maybe just reformatted in a different presentation? So there's all those questions around kind of the non-guest room spaces, because most of our hotels are much greater than just a bunch of guest rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to go first or me go first?
Sure. Yeah. It's I think, and certainly it's been a consideration and something that we're thinking about and working on and acting on already in some cases for all of our hotels, especially though in our select service, Marriott's, where you see some of that sort of, purposely designed, guest engagement and social space in lobbies. And bars, and grab and go food service and those kind of things. I think the critical piece for me here is that this is new for everyone, and it's new for all of our guests. And I think when they look at a space like that, they don't know what to do in it. They don't know what's kind of okay. They don't quite know how to make social distancing work and perhaps still have a drink and that kind of stuff. And I think that's our job as hoteliers, to sort of, you know, reimagine these spaces with social distancing in mind, and then use, you know, visual cues and signage and, you know, direct communication from our associates, to kind of let the guest know how they can, you know, be in that space, perhaps relax a little bit and have some confidence that they're safe, and then perhaps have that beer or have that snack or have that glass of wine. But I think we need to help them get there. We need to help them build the confidence that that's going to be okay and that they're going to be safe doing that. You know, we can't just sort of say, okay, our occupancy levels are going to be 50% of what they used to be in food and beverage spaces and hope the guests figure it out. I think, you know, we need to take the responsibility for reimagining the spaces and how they'll get used and then relay that to guests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think in select service, premium select service assets, I think grab and go is here to stay for the foreseeable future. The interesting thing is that the customer is accepting it, and they're not complaining about it. And as it's a pretty efficient way of providing breakfast, I think we're going to try to see how long we can go with it, because as I said, it's efficient. On the full service side, the breakfast buffet, you know, maybe the soup Nazi has to come back. No soup for you if you don't do if you don't do six feet of social distancing. So perhaps we need a buffet attendant to keep an eye on things and help guests and things like that. And in bars, I think it's going to be very similar. We're going to have to spread out the tables a little bit more than what we've done in the past. We'll probably end up with a situation that our employees, at least for the foreseeable future, will be wearing the masks as they are serving our guests. And, you know, it's going to be odd, but I mean, I think that is the new reality, at least for the foreseeable future. The one area that I'm really concerned about is conventions and large group bookings. On the one hand, not on the one hand, we had assumed that in Q3 that would come roaring back. I think that might be later, given the earlier discussion that we had, that in Canada, most of the universities are now going online for fall semester. So that's probably the bellwether that group business is going to be problematic in Q3, maybe in Q4 it'll come back. But more specific to how we operate, we need density in our banquet space in order to make money. So if you have a normal round where you could seat 8, you can now basically have 2. So how does that work, if that works at all? Same with classroom setups and things like that. And I do think that the brands have to be more accommodating with the operators, where pictures on our websites need to be revamped to show social distancing. And I would really like the brands to be a little bit more proactive when it comes to that, and that they get the websites ready now to show social distancing from a meeting and group perspective.
I have a quick question. Just what about outdoor spaces? Aodhan, I don't know if you want to maybe tackle this one. Have you given, are there going to be hand sanitizing stations outside? What about those hotels that perhaps have barbecue areas or even the broader ones that have big outdoor spaces that guests utilize?
Yeah, no question. And outdoor space is kind of, on our list, or, something that we're thinking and talking about now, especially as better weather arrives back and forth across Canada. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, they offer some opportunity. I think there's both a reality and perhaps a perception about, being outside, being a little safer than being inside. So I think there's some opportunity there in terms of, gazebo spaces and barbecue spaces and fire pits and that kind of stuff. And I think that those will probably help us spread out a little bit by using those spaces perhaps more effectively than we have in the past. But then we will also have to address the same kinds of issues in terms of density, furniture, layout, and you know, what are the sanitation opportunities, which are normally not as readily accessible when people are in those outside spaces as when they're in inside spaces. So, but I do think outside space will be a key component going forward. I know in some municipalities, Calgary included, as they're beginning to plan for reopening, the city is looking at allowing sidewalk patio space in many locations where they haven't permitted it before, in order to allow the restaurant to you know, expand their seating capacity when they have to go to 50% capacity inside. So, you know, I think we all have to look for those kind of creative solutions. I want to jump back for 1 second too. You know, I agree very much with what Guido said earlier, that the customer has been very accommodating so far. But probably the key element for me and for our teams and my team thinking forward now is that so far is probably the key element of that. You know, as long as you were looking after the health and safety piece, the customer so far has been willing to, you know, accept almost any restriction or any limitation or any reduction in service in order to ensure the safety part is there. But I think that's beginning to change already. And so I think as hoteliers, we need to really think about how we can bring back and augment the service piece, the hospitality piece, without, you know, challenging the health and safety side. But increasingly, we're finding our customers that are starting to come back, or places where we are busy, you know, they're starting to wonder about the services, and they're starting to want more of those while still staying safe.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think that that'll become really important for the full service hotels. And as you climb that chain scale, you know, the luxury hotels especially, I think that it'll be interesting to see how they handle some of the cleaning and sanitization and social distancing measures while trying to provide service at that level. So shifting gears a little bit here, rightly or wrongly, industry has been criticized historically for being slow to adopt technological changes. And things like keyless entry, remote check-in, paperless invoicing, those sorts of solutions are being presented now. They may be expedited perhaps in this new environment. Guido, have you guys started adopting some of these already? Do you think you're going to expedite some of this?
Well, I guess the short answer is yes. You know, I agree with you. I think in general, the hospitality industry is fairly slow in adopting new technologies, and I think that there's really two reasons for it. You know, at our core, at our root, we're hospitality people, and we want that human interaction. So to mechanize or to automate would take away from that customer interaction, which I think goes a little bit against what we are, which is hospitality professionals. I think the second reason why it's taking us a fair bit of time to adjust and adapt to technology is just the magnitude of capital required to do this. I mean, you know, it's not inexpensive to retrofit a hotel with brand new locks to accommodate this. So I think those are the two reasons why perhaps we're a little bit slower. But I think there is a seismic shift, you know, throughout this epidemic, to get on the bandwagon and go and do these kind of things. So yeah, remote check-in, you know, the door situation, things like that. It's here. It's probably here to stay. So we have already invested in that. We will continue to invest in that. And I think it's going to be especially interesting to see in the upper upscale and luxury section of our business, how they're going to still provide luxury service while they have to deal with social distancing. How do you get a premium rate if you you know, if you can't provide your core hospitality services? It's going to be fascinating to see how that all unfolds over the next little bit.
Yeah, and staffing levels.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Aodhan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the creative challenge, you know, for us in the business, and you know, probably at every stop on the chain scale. But yeah, certainly we're looking at technology pieces. As an operator, we have been paperless for quite some time in terms of housekeeping and communication back and forth between departments and that kind of thing. But we are looking at accelerating some of those things that are already established in the industry, like mobile check-in and text to guest, those kinds of things. But I think we're also remembering, I think, that the core still of what needs to be modified here is around the focus on sanitation, the focus on cleanliness, the communication around that, and the distancing piece. And when it comes to things that require major capital investments, I think it's appropriate for us to take a little time, get guests back in our hotels in a little bit larger numbers, and make sure we understand how it's going to work and what their sort of evolved wants and needs are going to be, so that we then place our always limited capital in the right places, and that we make sure that modifications that we're going to make that are of a longer term nature are going to ultimately be the right ones.
Yeah, no, those are really important considerations. And I think the discussions with the brands are going to certainly get interesting around some of this.
Yeah.
Whether they start requiring things outside of PIP cycles, that sort of thing. And I think we keep circling around this, but the communication from all the different stakeholders is going to be so critical through all of this, making sure that everyone, those lines of communication stay open.
I think that's a great point, and I think and that's something that I think I'd encourage everybody here online to do, is to really communicate with their brands about what they're experiencing, what their customers are saying, where they think they want to spend some money and where they think they don't want to spend money. I serve on some franchise advisory committees, but I think it's important for us to be feeding up to the brands, because I think this is a time where they're going to go through more change in terms of policies and procedures and standards, kind of all at once than maybe ever before for brands. And I think there's a real opportunity for owners, for operators, to influence those decisions as we go. So I encourage everybody to get really active on that front.
Agree. Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about the expense side of the equation for a minute here. Certainly CBRE, our trends database, would indicate that in times where we see RevPAR contraction, whether it be significant or not, certainly there tends to be an erosion in bottom line performance, because we have a lot of fixed operating costs, and the variable costs, depending on the situation, can still be escalating while we're seeing RevPAR declines. No doubt, obviously, that there'll be short-term RevPAR declines. And, what does that mean? What are you guys seeing, I guess, already in terms of maybe some increased costs? I know that it's early days still, but do you have a sense of where you're seeing those increased cost pressures, and what kind of assumptions are you making about those cost pressures going forward? So Aodhan, I don't know if you want to start off there.
Yeah, I mean, no question. It's something that we all need to be thinking about. I think in the immediate response, sort of back in late March, we knew that the first phase of this, I guess, was going to be very, very tough. So we certainly reached out to all of our major vendors, all of our major suppliers and partners, and in many cases, just asked for relief. Asked what they could do for us, and I will say, back and forth across the country, service providers and vendors, large and small, were very responsive to that, and very responsive to open conversations about what their cost inputs were and what their limitations were then in terms of what they could do for us. But we certainly experienced significant cost savings that we were obviously then able to kind of roll forward to our owners. And that's helped us through this period and still helping sustain us as we speak. And then looking forward, I mean, there will be cost pressures as a result of this. I think there are labor considerations, not a huge impact on sort of the consumable side of cleaning products and materials, that kind of thing. A few alterations, one product versus another, but not huge changes or costs. We think there'll be some on, on some of the machines. Everyone's looking at different things, whether it's HEPA vacuums or sprayers or UVC lights and those kinds of things that might prove valuable through this. But I think my main focus here is that this has always been our job as hotel operators, as hoteliers, to sort of say, what's really important to customers, what are really their wants and needs, and how do we prioritize those, and then we spend our money on prioritizing those things that are really important to our customers. And I think now we're finding out, obviously, that cleanliness and sanitation and the visibility of those things are really important to our customers. So we're going to spend some money there. And then we're going to look for ways to be as efficient as possible, not only in doing that, but obviously in the areas that perhaps then are lower priorities for our customers. So I think it's just evolving. But being productive and being efficient has been a huge part of being in the hotel business forever. And this is just a new angle on that, I think.
Yeah. Guido, I don't know if you have anything else to add there in terms of the cost pressures you're seeing, or maybe how you're working with suppliers or others to look for savings in other areas.
I think most of it was chatted about. I mean, like every other operator, you go line by line, supplier by supplier, phone call after phone call. What can you do? Both on the consumable side as well as on the debt side. And obviously, every CFO, worth their keep has done that. And for the most part, I'd say in our industry, the debt holders have been quite accommodating. There's a couple of areas on a go forward base I'm concerned about. Obviously, the cost for this heightened cleaning that our customers need, want, and deserve. There's a cost associated with that. Initially, I think the cost is going to be somewhat inflated. We just purchased, for instance, I think it was 2,000 face masks. They were $4.49 each, when 2 months ago you could purchase them for less than $1. So there's definitely a cottage industry sprouting up of companies that are trying to help us and are definitely profiting from this epidemic. So I think in the short term you're going to see that. You're going to see the introduction of some technology to keep our customers and employees safe. There will be a cost associated with that. And then the labor cost, I think it's going to be a bit of touch and go. I think on the one hand, it's going to take us longer to clean a room. On the other hand, I think the whole concept of stay-over cleaning is going to be either gone or modified. I don't think our clients, our customers, our guests want our employees in their room on a stayover. And I think our employees more than likely also have some hesitation with that. So I think you're going to see, you're going to see on the one hand, it takes us longer to clean a room. On the other hand, we don't have to do it every day. So I think it'll probably be a wash. At least I hope it's going to be a wash. So I think those are sort of the areas that we're looking at in addition to what Aodhan just brought up. So, yeah.
So along that similar thought process, other procedures will probably start to look different at hotels, in hotels as well. CBRE's Occupier Services Group are putting together resources for users of office and retail, guiding them on how to reopen. We know at airports, we've already seen temperature checks being implemented, the requirement for face masks, that sort of thing. Do you think that over the next several months or even years, that we'll start to see an implementation of perhaps other procedures that will affect the guest experience?
I think so. Yeah, I would say that, our guests are actually expecting that. And I think to provide a level of comfort, I think we need to, whether that is, those heat scanners, the thermal scanners that we could have at our front desk. We're actually looking at that currently to see if we should invest in that. But I think we need to, as our customer is expecting it and would want it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, you know, because now we're stretching, I think, a little bit into the longer term, and for me, there's some debate there. You know, we've been operating, and we've had some hotels, as Guido has, that have remained very busy through this period, and some of them very busy through this period in ways that are directly a result of the COVID-19 crisis. One of the things I think that's taught us is that you know, we're trying to shape our service delivery and service model in a way that assumes essentially that any guest or any associate could be positive for COVID-19. And I think that has actually freed us a little bit to not have to try to figure out, you know, try to evaluate whether a guest is or isn't sick, to look at them and try to figure that out. And that might potentially allow us, in my view anyway, to avoid some of these scans and checks and that kind of thing. And certainly I'd like the experience to be as you know, non-invasive as possible, and have that hospitality component in there that I keep talking about. Unavoidably, there'll be some changes. You know, elevator rides can't be the same. Certainly we're looking at fitness centers like Guido mentioned, potentially even looking at, you know, when you have occupancy limits on fitness centers, do you have to have a booking process, a reservation process associated with that, and enhanced key control for access, and those kinds of things. So pieces of it will change. But I think for me, the goal is going to be to provide that confidence and that actual health, that safe experience for our guests and for our associates, but to do it in a way that we always try to minimize sort of the negative or the invasive aspects of those changes.
Right. That makes sense.
And just switching, we probably have time to get through this last question, and then we'll look at some of the Q&A that's been coming in as we've been chatting. But on the customer side, as we start to look forward, and maybe your teams at the property level are starting to have discussions about new pieces of business or bidding on upcoming L&R accounts or other meeting conference events, are you starting to see, or have you seen any RFPs coming through at this point that are either asking for specific requirements around cleaning and sanitization, or are asking to be provided with documentation and information on that process? Maybe, I don't know, Aodhan, if you wanna start there.
Yeah, and the answer is, the quick answer is definitely yes. We're not finding so far, with the exception of maybe some public health authorities, that they're asking, you know, very specific questions, that they know exactly what they want to have in place. I think companies right now don't necessarily know that, but we are seeing, you know, when you respond, can you send us you know, something on your policies and procedures. They certainly at this stage are wanting to see simply that you are thinking about it, that you have, you know, policies and procedures in place, that you've implemented some changes that are going to help keep them safe when their employees come to stay with you. I think that'll get a bit more specific over time, and perhaps there'll be some consistency around what are the sort of minimum or main expectations. But right now, I think companies mainly just want to know that you're on it. And then after that, it's about sort of, you know, satisfying guests one at a time when they're in-house.
Great.
Guido, did you have anything to add there? I'm assuming you're seeing similar things.
Yeah, I do. Obviously, I agree. Two other comments on that is that you know, RFPs are my favorite subject because it gives you the opportunity to negotiate and renegotiate. I don't know how many people are on the Zoom call today, but I would just like to ask everyone in our business that as we go through the new RFP process for 2021, that we don't undercut each other. It's going to take years to get our ADRs back to to profitability. I mean, our labor costs are going to continue to increase. If we're all going to cut our ADRs just to get 1 or 2 extra occupancy points, I think we're in real big trouble. So when it comes to RFPs, don't drop your pants. That would be my first comment on that. The second comment is with regards to especially the group and convention hotels. We are seeing some requests from those conveners to be fairly specific in some of the verbiage in the contract. You know, force majeure, pandemic clauses, et cetera, et cetera. So we are seeing that, and obviously we're willing to discuss and accommodate where possible. So yeah, don't drop your ADR.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sylvia, I don't know if you want to try and get to 1 or 2 of these questions. We've had lots coming in as we've been having this discussion, but
Yes.
maybe we can get to 1 or 2. I'll let you see what pops up there.
Sure, for sure. Thanks. And yeah, well, there's lots of questions. I don't think we're going to get through the majority of them, but this one I think is a hot topic, and it's the free breakfast model in limited service properties. So the question is, do you feel now's the time, with an increase in costs clearly evident for franchisees, to move away from the free breakfast, especially since the buffet style will clearly no longer be viable?
I think that's a really good question, and it's something that I've discussed even in the past week with a couple of different brand leaders. You know, it's a developing, you know, kind of story, I think. But I think that there may be some opportunity there. My feeling today is that, you know, at the economy segment, potentially at the very lower end of the mid-scale segment, there may actually be an opportunity to do that, to kind of refocus, I guess, based on what guests' requirements are. And if the, you know, economy, lower mid-scale offerings want to focus on the cleanliness, kind of focus on the basic experience, there may be the option of moving away for some brands, moving away from the free breakfast being provided. But then I think, you know, as you move into the mid-scale, you know, whether that's in a limited service environment or a select service environment, and certainly at full service, I don't think it can go away. I think you have to look at your brand's positioning, you know, against your competitive set of brands, and say, if we want to compete in that space, we're going to have to maintain that. But yeah, I think there can be a little bit of a reordering, and there may be some opportunity in the lower end of the chain scale.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Aodhan. I'm going to direct this one to Guido. Guido, what are your thoughts on opening amenities such as fitness centers and pools based on a room reservation model, given the number of touch points?
Sorry, I could not hear you. Sorry, say that again.
So what are your thoughts on opening amenities like fitness centers or pools based on a room reservation model?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, you know, if there's a lot of demand for the pool and or the workout room, then more than likely we have to get to a sign-in system or a reservation system. No doubt. I mean, we can't have the same density, and that probably makes sense to consider that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Nicole, have you been scanning? Are there any that you'd like to try and tackle, or I can jump?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so many here, but I think maybe we can. I saw a question come through here, and somebody said, you know, is this the time that hotels should be looking at maybe charging a fixed, you know, sanitization fee, kind of like a resort fee, to somewhat offset some of the cleaning costs, or the additional cleaning costs?
I don't think so. You know, personally, I think, you know, this is what we do as an industry. We are to provide a clean and safe product. To upcharge for what we do as a core, I think perhaps is not the right thing to do. What I can see happening is, you know, if you want service on day 3 or day 4 or day 2 for that matter, there might be a small upcharge, something like that. But at its core, I doubt it. Aodhan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm generally in the camp of trying not to nickel and dime customers. You know, as I said earlier, I think it's our job to figure out what they want and give that to them, and find the right price for that product.
Yeah.
But I also think you're right. We're looking at it right now. I'm very cautious about it. But there may be some opportunity for optional services, optional amenities that do speak to the COVID piece. But I do think we need to be sure that whatever is the core expectation of our customers, that we're delivering that for the price they're paying, and that other things that we potentially make optional and charge them for are truly optional experiences that the need for them, the want for them might vary between guests.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's somebody here who's actually reopening just this coming weekend, and so they've asked what the time how much has changed in terms of the time required to clean a room. Can either of you speak to that? I'm assuming the amount of time to clean a room has increased. Well, how have you seen that change?
So in our call it isolation rooms, where we have groups that stay in those in the hotel for 14 days in one big stretch, where we do not go into the room throughout that 2-week period, it's well over an hour that it takes us to totally clean that room top to bottom. On our transient rooms, it is a little bit longer. I think it's about 7 minutes or so that we take extra to clean that room. If that answers the question.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I think those numbers are pretty consistent with my experience.
Great. Well, we're 6 minutes past 2. Stephanie, what do you think? Oh,
you're on mute, Stephanie.
Sorry about that. If you have time for one more question, and then we will close it off.
Okay. Here's one. What are you planning to do to keep the morale up and engage team members as you bring them back?
Very good question. We started about a month, maybe a little bit more than a month, with a product called Speak App. It's basically, it looks like a Facebook product, but just only acceptable or can be accepted to people that you invite. So we rolled that all out company-wide, where we use that platform to communicate with not just our managers and leaders, but all our employees throughout the company. So from ownership to senior management to general managers, to servers, to housekeepers, they all contribute and are part of that microcosm of Newcastle Hotels, and it's going quite well. And it's interesting to see through this pandemic the uptick and absorption of technology so quickly. And then on top of that, what we're doing, actually today we started sending pizza lunches to our operating hotels, just to say thank you for hanging in there. So it's a big thing to keep, and I'm really happy about this question actually, about our teams. If you look at CNN, for instance, there's going to be a mental health crisis 2 or 3 months from now. People feeling alone, people being away from loved ones for a long time. I think we need to be really cognizant of the fact that things have changed, and this is a really big deal, and we need to make sure that we look after our employees, especially those from Asia. Quite frankly, there's a lot of stuff going on, both in the media as well as in workplaces, where people that come from Asian countries are being singled out as COVID folks. And I think as leaders, we need to be very focused on that and make sure that we provide a workplace that is free of harassment and is a fun place to come to work to. So I think it's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know we're right at the very, very end here, but because it's such an important area, I want to jump in on that too. Our associates, and I'm sure across the whole industry, have been absolutely exceptional kind of through this time. you know, so committed to their job, so committed to their guests. They're obviously our very own, you know, frontline workers, and really, you know, deserve to be recognized and treated as such. We've obviously had to change some of the ways that we do that. You know, not as much food, and not as much sharing food and those kinds of things, certainly. But we've done things like, you know, there's window painting to send messages to guests or to associates. We've live streamed a lot of our appreciation events, or you know, where we've had piano concerts and violin concerts and some question and answer over that live streaming, and you know, where we've been able to have associates from right across the country kind of log in and get to experience the event, but also perhaps add some questions. You know, we had a pianist, jazz pianist, who was able to take requests, and so he was playing in the lobby of a closed hotel, but our associates from across the country were able to make requests and listen to that. So it has been huge, and it will be huge. But and given that this is the last question, I'm gonna gratuitously take the opportunity to thank my frontline associates across the country, who have worked so hard and done such great work, as well as my corporate team here in Calgary, who you know, responded like lightning to get onto this issue, and just, you know, working tirelessly since then to do the best job possible for our guests. So thanks very much to my crew.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you, Sylvia, Nicole, Aodhan, and Guido, for all of your insight today and taking the time to be with us. Please join us next week, Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, for our next CHIC Digital webinar on our President and CEO Roundtable, the landscape shaping the future of the Canadian hotel industry. Register now. We think we have a fantastic panel for that one. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.